All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Real Deal podcast.
Welcome.
Of course, I am here, Mr. Cleon Deal, and we, of course, are here with the man himself,
How's it going?
Mr. B. Haley.
Howdy. Welcome back.
Welcome back, man. We're back, and we're better. Why? Because we're in 220. Wow. 2025. 2025.
We're in 220, guys.
We're in
220. Rock on, baby.
220s, baby. Here in
Whatever that
2025.
means.
Yeah. Forgive my flub of the tongue there. But yeah, baby, we're back and we're in 2025. How you feeling?
Honestly, I'm a little tired.
Yeah. Starting the year off right?
Starting the year off right, dude. Always tired, so
That just means you're always working.
trying to. So what are we going to talk about today? A lot of stuff's happened. I guess before we get into the topic of today, there are some current events that unfortunately have happened on New Year's Eve that I do want to briefly talk about.
Okay.
One being the tragic event that happened in New Orleans. So condolences and hearts and prayers out to love and prayers out to all the families affected in that.
Yeah.
You know anything about this so far?
So basically, a vehicle drove into a crowded area, killing 10 people, injuring about 30 more. It's
10 so far. I think there's another report showing 15. It could be even more by the time that this episode actually drops. But
yeah. So it's like labeled as a mass casualty event. They're investigating terrorism.
Yeah, 100%
for this because apparently there were devices, I guess, that they found or recovered.
Apparently there was an ISIS flag.
Yeah.
There will probably be more information on that story by the time this episode airs. Apparently there was a flag found and then someone was trying to cover it up. So there's a lot of little stuff that's going on. I think 100% it's a terrorist attack because that's just absolutely mind-boggling that would happen. People, like, it's crazy. There's always something going on. And it's
Always
just
something going on.
It just feels like we live in a day and age where you always got to have your head on a swivel and people can't even go out and enjoy that in peace. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know where we go as a nation as this, but like you always got to be prepared. Be prepared.
Yeah.
For that kind of stuff. I don't really have a lot of information on that. But there was also a Tesla Cybertruck that blew up in front of the Trump Tower on New Year's Day.
Oh, yeah. I think I saw a brief video about that.
So I don't know too much about it either, but apparently it just seems like somebody trying to send a message to, I would guess, Trump and Elon Musk. So that's
more to come on that.
What a crazy world we can live in,
Yeah.
What a beautiful world it can be at times, but then there people got free will, and sometimes people do some crazy stuff with the free will. But hearts and prayers out to all those affected and those crazy things. So I don't really want to talk too much about those, but crazy stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So in today's topic, we want to talk about love, and Valentine's Day is next month, but not just love in general, but how we were taught love and like how that affects us in relationships now. And we'll talk about a little bit of rom-coms. And I watched a movie. It's actually a book called It Ends With Us, mostly because Blake Lively was in it. But also, I am a sucker for love. I'm a sucker for rom-coms.
True hopeless romantic. He's hopeless when it comes to romance. That's what I mean.
I am a true hopeless romantic. I am a rom-com nerd. Yeah, I love rom-coms. But the movie, I feel like, has a lot it can teach us about society and how your upbringing affects how you act in relationships. I feel like it's really good at storytelling in that nature for the two people that end up meeting, how their childhood affects where they're at in their current relationship. How, you always say is like in your childhood, you always accept or reject what you see. And then it's like, it shows her, kind of in the beginning rejecting it, but then when she gets into a relationship, she starts to accept it.
Yeah.
subconsciously. So where do you want to start with the movie? Because I feel like there's a lot of good learning lessons in the movie. And if you haven't seen the movie yet, there's going to be some spoilers.
Yeah, just pause the episode, go watch the movie, then come back and listen to the rest of this.
Yeah, so where do you want to start with the movie?
Let's start at the beginning.
Start at the beginning. All right. So the beginning of the movie starts with Blake Lively going to her father's funeral. And she's supposed to speak. I give a little eulogy at her father's funeral, and she writes down 5 things.
5 things she loves about him.
5 things she loves about him on a paper napkin, and they're blank. So she gets up there to give her speech, and she looks at everybody, and then just walks away.
Yeah,
and we later come to find out that the reason she didn't say anything, her father was abusive, and that's what she saw growing up.
Right.
And then that leads to going to the rooftop where she
scene.
meets Ryle
Kincaid is his name.
Ryle Kincaid.
And she's Lily Bloom in the movie.
Lily Bloom, and she owns a flower shop, which is Lily Blossom Bloom.
Lily Blossom Bloom.
That's amazing.
Writers worked really hard on that one.
I love it. And then she goes to the rooftop where she meets this sad guy who ends up being a neurosurgeon. And
so how did they meet? Let's talk about that first.
She's in his penthouse apartment building, whatever, and she's at the rooftop. And then he's coming up there angry and kicks over the chair and table or whatever it may be. So that's already number one a sign.
It's not a good first impression.
Exactly. That's already number one a sign. So when you see something like that, that's somebody that doesn't have control over their emotions. So they lack full emotional intelligence. So she sees that, but obviously, they engage in conversation.
Because he's attractive.
And eventually she finds out he's a neurosurgeon, so he's attractive and a neurosurgeon. And then they get into talking about ugly truths, which then they go into, or what does she mention? And her ugly truth is she slept with a homeless guy, and his ugly truth.
Yes. His ugly truth was...
about the kid who ended up getting shot?
Well, that's what he said he did that day, basically.
So that's what he said that he did that day, that he was upset because there was a kid who shot his brother, and then he did everything he did to save him, and he couldn't save him.
Yeah.
And then she's like, wow, I wonder what would happen to a person like that. And he goes, they'll never recover. You know what I'm saying? And come to find out later in the movie that he's just talking about himself.
Yes.
So he just held on to something from his past for that long. Later in that conversation, they keep talking, and then what else? She said something. Or he basically she's shock me, and then he's like, I want to have sex with you. And then they go into conversation. He's basically like, I'm not good in relationships.
Yes, he says that I am not good with love. Relationships, but lust is great.
Yeah, love isn't for me, but lust is nice. So when you're having a conversation like that in the first place with somebody, listen to the words. You know what I'm saying? She didn't fool up, get into it, hey, let's go out and stuff. They end up meeting randomly in the movie again at a different time. But yeah, listen to the words that people are saying, because what they're telling you is usually accurate.
Now, what we also have to understand, though, because number one, women find honesty refreshing. So I get what you're saying in terms of paying attention to what they're saying. But at the same time, it's one of those things I should probably back off because he doesn't have a relationship. But also, it's very nice that he's telling me this, and I actually like how honest he is. So it seems like that might give a girl conflicted feelings about how, because she ends up entertaining it even further to the point where they almost kiss there on the rooftop.
And then he gets a call that he has to go back.
Exactly.
Or go into surgery.
Which they're both in a vulnerable place at that time, so obviously that could have something to do with it.
Right, because she's dealing with her dad dying, and the guy, I guess, just hasn't let go of the past of what he did. And then fast forward, it flashes back. The movie flashes back to her in the story of the quote unquote the homeless guy. Well, not necessarily a homeless guy, because when we say homeless guy, he is a kid who a kid at her high school that got kicked out of his mother's house. And so it flashes back to that, because if you're just talking about homeless guy, you're just thinking like, oh wow, this is a really weird story. So it flashes back to that and basically starts to show in how they built that relationship before they ended up hooking up. So it's a kid who got kicked out of his mother's house, sees this, and then she like brings him food and stuff. Then they start having a conversation, and she's like, what happened? Why do you live with it? Why do you live in whatever, the little hole in the wall, essentially? And he's like, basically said that he beat the crap out of his mother's boyfriend because he beats his mother, essentially.
Right.
So there's a lot of domestic violence.
A lot.
Talked about.
Trigger warning.
Early on. And basically, Blake Lively's mother in the movie stayed with her dad, who was beating her, essentially. Blake Lively grew up watching that and just like rejected it. I don't ever want to be in that. So she found confidence in who is essentially like almost like being like her hero, because he is stepping in to beat up the guy that's beating his mother, where she can't really do that in that situation. Yeah. So she grows up seeing this, and it's a cycle. She's like, oh, I don't really want to continue. And then fast forward back into the movie in time, it goes back to the current day. She opens up her not coffee shop, but her flower shop. Yeah. And then the woman she ends up hiring.
Yeah, some woman who's walking down the street who just happens to walk in.
Right, randomly. Ends up being Ryle's sister. Yeah. So then they come back into each other's lives, reconnect. Eventually, they hook up, they start getting together, and then they get, or he's like he wants to work it out. Right. He wants to try in a relationship.
Having a relationship. Like, let's do it. Okay.
And then they go from that, and then they get into the relationship. And then there's points in the movie where there's like, it doesn't look like domestic violence. It doesn't look like it's something crazy that happened. Correct. That's how the movie portrays it, because that's how her thoughts happen.
Right. So like the first instance, he's grabbing something out of the oven, apparently, and it's like he burns his hand and pulls his hands off really quickly and ends up hitting her.
Yeah, because they're having an intimate moment, and then they're like, oh, the smoke starts rising, so he quickly does it, and she's like talking to him. It goes into like a lot of commotion happening, and then he ends up hitting her in the face, but it doesn't show that. It just shows as like he fell into her.
Pulled his hands off really quick and ends up hitting her by accident.
So it looks like an accident. So she's like, oh my God, what just happened? And then in her head, she's like subconsciously telling herself, oh no, it was just an accident. It was an accident. Yeah. So she is seeing what she wants to see at this point in time. Yeah. So this is a good lesson, because when you are in these kind of relationships and you love that person, it's just like, that's what you're going to do. You're going to see what you want to see about that person. So
I also think what you tell yourself kind of shapes what you see. So like you said, she saw her mother being abused, and she decided that she would never accept something like that. So then when it begins happening to her, I would never let something like that happen to me. So clearly that can't be what happened. And so now in my head, this is what actually is, even though it isn't.
And then, she's kind of like replaying situations in her head, and then another situation happens to where he just starts being like weird, aggressive, sexual assault, essentially, even though they're married at the time or whatever.
There's a time in between that, right?
What else happened?
So that was the time where I think that he had first discovered that. So basically they went out to eat.
To
the restaurant. Oh, yeah. And then the guy who owns the restaurant ends up being
their server.
The aforementioned. Well, he's the owner of the restaurant.
He serves him that day, and he's also the owner.
He's also the owner,
and he ends up being the guy,
the guy who got kicked out of his mother's house, who she knew from years and years ago.
Way back.
And so they end up reconnecting there almost by accident when they're basically they're at dinner with Blake Lively. Lily Bloom is at dinner with her mother and Ryle in the movie. And then basically she comes in and she recognizes him and recognizes his ring and goes to speak. And they rekindle, they have a conversation or whatever the case is. So they meet there. And at some point, She gets his phone number.
Yeah, he goes into the coffee shop and because he saw the black eye.
Correct.
So he saw that because the dinner happened right after that first domestic assault incident.
Right.
So he sees the black eye and he's like, oh, so he's trying to be the protector like he was for his mother.
Right.
So his childhood, that's what he did. He saw what he didn't like, and he was his mother's quote unquote protector, even though that she didn't see it that way.
Right.
Because she was stuck in the cycle of seeing what she wanted to see and not like, oh no, he's not. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Right.
So he was a protector in his childhood, continued to be.
Right.
And so that's where he went to her flower shop. I was like, hey, you know, if this turns out to be domestic violence, whatever, let me know so I can be in there. Yeah, and then it goes to the scene where her phone drops or whatever, and the number pops out. He sees it.
Yep. And then he gets upset, and then she tries to, you storm out. She goes and chases him. And basically they're now on a staircase in which she ends up accidentally falling down the stairs as they're in this thing here. And so in her head, right, that's what she sees. It was an accident because she was trying to kind of get her phone back and kind of talk to him, trying to get him to stay there so they could talk it out. And she ends up falling down the stairs. She wakes up, she's in bed, and he's tending to her.
Taking care of her, and it was a quote unquote accident, and that's how she saw it. And then fast forward, basically, because you guys just watched the movie.
Yeah.
Fast forward to the end of the movie, and she's starting to come to a realization, like, oh, maybe all these accidents, like, weren't actually accidents, and then it actually shows what really happened, and it shows like him punching her, it shows him pushing her down out of the anger, and then there was another incident as well. I can't remember the third. There was like, I know at least one other.
There was one more
incident, but whatever, I can't remember. But basically, to go over like how our childhood actually affects how we show up into relationship is Ryle. He experienced something so traumatic because he mentally shooting and killing his older brother when he was a child. Yeah. And he never fully healed from that and never let that go. So not being able to own your emotions and the lack of emotional intelligence that he had carried on into his adult life. And that's how he showed up into relationships, that's why he always said that, hey, I'm not good at relationships. Lust is good for me. That's all that I need, essentially. So he tries to get into a relationship, but this is a person who hasn't done the inner work and doesn't know how to control his emotions. He's still that same little boy that killed his brother on accident. He never really fully recovered from it. So it just keeps showing up, and he doesn't know how to manage his emotions. So that's how he showed up in the relationship, is as the abuser or somebody who is sporadic and out of control with their emotions. Basically. So essentially, he's not like technically a bad person. That's just how he was raised. So Blake Lively in the movie sees him as that good person, right? Just out of control emotions. So can't control his emotions, ends up doing all these things, and she's her childhood. She grows up seeing the domestic violence with her dad and her mother. So she chooses not to see it there. She chooses not to really like care for her father as much, but obviously it's a father. She gets into a relationship, and now she's repeating the same cycle that she seen as a kid. Right. And then the whole I guess concept of the movie is it ends with us. So she ends up getting pregnant. Yeah. And then she has a decision to make as she like realizes that she's pregnant and that she's going to keep the kid. That's when her realization of, oh my God, like this is what actually happened. She starts to have a clearer mindset or a clearer vision of what happened. Like she visually sees herself getting pushed down the stairs, and he's trying to come back into her life, and that's when she stops it. So that's the whole concept of the movie, is breaking those generational curses and the generational stories that happen. The kid that she had hooked up with early on ends up, still being the protector that he is, and says,
Yeah, she ends up staying at his house for a few days and things like that. Just keeping her there until she was ready to
giving
move
her
on.
a safe place to be, and then basically says like towards the end of the movie, like if you ever find yourself ready for another relationship, like I'll be here. And then whatever it is, a couple years down the road, kids grown up a little bit, they end up running into each other, and then that's when they have their happy ending. So basically, shows their childhood trauma that they went through, they never really let it go. So if you're not aware of it, like you're going to continuously bring that into relationships, just like Ryle did unintentionally. He just knew what, I'm not good in relationships. I'm not that kind of guy. And he said it to her from the beginning. He just didn't have enough emotional intelligence to sit with himself and do the work and figure out why. It's because his emotions were sporadic and out of control. That's why he's not good in relationships. So once he tried to get into one, once he actually fell in love, because he didn't do that inner work with himself, it started to show. And unfortunately, it showed in the form of domestic violence. So you got to sit with yourself, essentially, and do that inner work and figure out why you are the way that you are in these kind of relationships. And don't be blinded to it.
Yeah, and anytime you recognize somebody has work to do on themselves when you do get into a relationship with them, you're choosing to accept them at where they're at. So understand that if you're not willing to remove yourself from them, there are going to be growing pains. Obviously, there are going to be some things that you are going to have to deal with along the way because since they didn't heal by themselves, that means they have to heal with you. And as they're on that journey, obviously you have some decisions to make on about how long you want to be around for that. Now, I do want to ask a question. During the movie, the sister, who was obviously her best friend, once she is aware of the abuse, she says something to her. Now, she says to her, she said, "I love you. You are my best friend." She said, "But if you take him back, I will never speak to you again." Now, a lot of us, unfortunately, do know somebody who's been in an abusive relationship. My question to you is, do you feel like that's the right approach to handle for your friend who's in that, to say, hey, if you take them back, because that is what happens a lot of times. They do take their abusive partner back.
Because you want to see the good in them. You think that they can change.
Yeah. So is that the right approach to take as the friend, to say, hey, if you take them back, I want nothing to do with you at that point?
I think temporarily, 100%. Because it's almost selfish if you're going to do that to your friend. Because let's say your best friend's in an abusive relationship and you're the one that has to hear it all the time. You know what I'm saying? So God forbid something terrible happened to you, like you go to jail, or worse, you're in such a bad relationship that, someone dies. Now that friend bears all the weight of the responsibility of, like, oh my God forbid that happened and that person died.
Right.
The best friend's going to bear all that responsibility. Sometimes you need that tough love, and you need someone to say, hey, snap the heck out of it. Like, listen to the signs. When you're in love and it's like such a toxic relationship or abusive relationship, like, you're always going to want to see the good in that person. But you got to think a little logically and think less with your heart in situations like that. It's going to be super hard. It always is super hard, but you're going to have to. So yeah, if you are the best friend in a situation like that, you need to, give them an ultimatum, make them wake the heck up. I agree with that for sure.
Interesting. Because, the counter argument to that is you're now leaving them without anybody to run to. And, you're leaving them in isolation, kind of on an island with this other person.
And that's sometimes the best thing for that person, because they have to, now they're by themselves. They have to sit with themselves.
Right.
And then they can do one of two things. They can either realize what's going on and what's going wrong and do the work.
Right.
Or they can continue the cycle and do the same thing with the next person. That's what you got to do, unfortunately. It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Because we think with our heart. And, when you're in those toxic relationships, you don't think they're as toxic till you get out of it. And you're like, oh, my God. You know? So it's like, and that's how it is when you're in love with somebody.
Yeah.
You don't want to see the bad things. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's way easier said than done. So sometimes you need that friend that's going to tell you, hey, never talking to you again. Yeah. Unless this happens.
Yeah. It's funny because as someone who's had a lot of friends of the how they're doing this and that. And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't want to hear no more about this person. I'm like, you come to me and to ask me all the questions, I've given you all the answers, and you're still doing the opposite of everything. So we could talk about anything you want except that, because at that point, I don't know what else to tell you.
Right. Yeah. You just keep putting yourself into the same cycle of the relationship. Right. And at some point, you got to make a decision and cut it off, cut it loose.
Yeah. So.
Other than that, if you want to watch the movie, those are just our takeaways from that movie. But how we were taught to love in general, like what are some of the things growing up that shape the way you show up in a relationship?
So this is funny because actually we talked about this when I went home for Christmas. We had a talk with my parents about kind of their journey, and obviously, like you say, like we talked about here, we're very relaxed people. So that's something that I kind of grew up seeing amongst my parents, and how they've been together for 35 years next year. One thing I've never seen them do is argue with each other. I've never seen anybody make a scene in public. I've never seen anybody put their hands on anybody else. I've barely ever seen a disagreement. But obviously that's like a two-sided coin, because number one, for me, that means that I'm not engaging in that. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of shaped that portion of it, and was like, if we have a problem, we're going to go over here and we're going to talk about it privately. Don't come talk to me crazy all out in front of people, right. Mainly because it's embarrassing. I'm not even really worried about, I know there's another portion of it like, oh, you're emasculating him when you're talking, which that is a part of it. Out in public. I hate loud people in public. Don't be here yelling at me. You know what I'm saying? So that's part of it in terms of how I handle disputes. Disputes are always handled privately, and they're going to be handled in a diplomatic manner. I'm not raising your voice. I'm not raising my voice at you. Please don't raise your voice at me, because obviously you don't want to listen to nobody yell at you, because your automatic defense to being yelled at is being defensive. If we're supposed to be a team and trying to be working toward the same goal, then unfortunately us opposing each other is not going to get us there. So that's kind of what my mindset is on it. Yeah. So that's kind of how I
talked about, like, since you've never seen your parents argue, you thought like once you got into a relationship that like arguing isn't a thing. You know, that Correct. Means it's a bad relationship.
Correct. Well, because basically what that means is that not only did I never see them dispute, but I also didn't know how to handle it. Right. So that's kind of the other side of that coin.
I will let you know, like, it is okay to argue.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was actually reading in the book, It's Not Me, It's You, is that listen to understand before being understood.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have disagreements and arguments.
Always.
Like, you can be in a relationship with somebody that's completely different with you, that has different political beliefs, different cultural background. Like, you don't have to agree on the same things, but listening to understand before you're understood, I think that's a big component that sometimes I even struggle with in relationships. What do you think, or how do movies, like romance movies, rom-coms, you're not a big rom-com guy.
No.
Because I told him to watch the movie, and he's like, I gotta go watch it. Well, how do you think? I guess you haven't watched that many, have you?
Well, I've watched enough.
Okay, so how do you think those movies affect people in relationships? Like growing up, seeing that kind of movie. How do you think that affects people in relationships?
So I think it does a good job of giving us an unrealistic expectation for the future, because in most of these things, they always end up working out in the end. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So what happens is that I think that people who, when you watch a lot of those things, especially growing up, and that shapes your idea of what love and relationships are supposed to be, you have a harder time letting go of things that are bad for you because you want your happy ending. Right. Because in your head, hey, it always works out.
If I push through, if I do this,
if I cry to you, you're gonna tell me everything you feel. I'll tell you, and then we're gonna be in love and have and all that blah 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 blah.
Yeah, when I was growing up watching some of them, I definitely used some of the like one-liners that were on rom-coms.
Oh yeah, I mean every 100%. Now and then you gotta if it works, it works. every now and then you'll hear something good. But yeah, I think it does. Like I said, it does a good job of giving you an unrealistic expectation about what it really looks like, especially those Hallmark movies, right? When some girl and then small town girl or city guy,
the big city guy.
Comes back home because he's working on a project, and then you guys meet at the apple farm and blah 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 blah,
and then everything works out, and then boom. The thing with those is like it doesn't show you the work that it takes to maintain and build a successful relationship. It shows you the Cliff Notes version of it, and at the end of the day, that's exactly what it is. It is entertainment. It makes us feel good, but it's not how real relationships work. There's a lot more work to be put into real relationships. And the movies end with the happy ending. The guy gets the girl marries the guy, the engagement happens, whatever. That's where it ends. Yeah. So the ending of a relationship isn't the marriage. That's only the beginning. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So there's so much work to be put into it. And, unfortunately, like that's how, we kind of grow up seeing these kind of movies, and then it kind of shapes us to act a certain way because that's the feeling that we want. The feeling that we got from watching the mushy gushy and oh my God, it's so perfect. It worked out so perfect. Yeah. We want that feeling. Yeah. Everybody is seeking that validation, that feeling, the feeling of love, of finding your lifelong partner, and so on and so forth. But the real work begins once the marriage happens. Yeah,
you made a good point of regarding maintaining. So a lot of, especially in a lot of those movies, is somebody does something wrong, then they do all the crying and showing up outside the window with the boombox trying to get them back, and they do. Now, if you are, especially a man, and you've done something to wrong a young lady, and then you came and got her back, you were able to win her back. The work that it takes to then keep her after that is now way more than it was before, because now she has this thing to hold on to. And also that, let me just say, ladies or whoever, if you are going to forgive somebody for something and take them back, you should actually forgive them for that thing. Not to say that the feeling goes away, but if you are only going to forgive them and then still hold that thing over their head, then leave them over there and don't take them back.
Which they will.
So the maintenance portion of that, especially after you've done something wrong, is probably the most difficult part, because y'all could be sitting there 2 years later and then they just looking at you and you're like, what's the problem? Like, I'm just thinking about that time where I thought we were past this.
Yeah, you never are.
You never really are.
Hold on to it. So sometimes you just got to let things go and enjoy the beauty of what it was. Yeah. And move on from there. Because I've been in that situation.
Yeah, no, you have. We worked on a couple of those together.
I'm sure. Yeah, you remember. Yeah. It's like sending the teddy bear and the chocolates and the balloons and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's like, cool. You show that you cared, and then, but it doesn't fix the problem.
It doesn't fix the problem. You know what I'm
saying? And not to say that you can't have problems in a relationship, because you can have problems. You just work through
and you will
them. And as long as you're growing together, like everybody, the individuals, you have to be working on yourself individual to show up as your best self in that relationship. And understand, like, your viewpoints can change, your personality can change. Like, things are going to change as long as you're continuously growing and continuously learning the other individual. It's going to work out. If you have to choose that person every single day, but you also have to choose to continuously learn and understand how they think. Yeah. Because just like in the movie, we are a byproduct of how we were raised. Yeah. The things that we went through as a child and into our early adulthood years, we are just a product of that. Yeah. So you have to understand that the way that somebody acts and reacts comes from that. It literally has nothing to do with you. Yeah. That's why in the book by John Kim and his wife, Vanessa, that's what it says. Like, you're your own relationship. You're your own individual in that relationship. How they show up and respond is not on you. You can only worry about how you show up and respond. How they show up and respond is based on their childhood, what they're going through, and the internal work that they continuously do.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I guess something that I like to equate it to is like for people who work customer service, and you get a call and somebody's yelling at you and cussing you out, and this is the first time you've ever spoken with them. Like, and obviously in my day-to-day job, I try to let people know, hey, by the way, that has nothing to do with you. You don't know this. You've done whatever this is. It's just them.
Yeah,
right?
they're not mad at you. They're just mad at the situation.
At the situation.
The problem is why people, think that they get mad at them is that energy is contagious.
Yeah.
So it's like that negative energy comes on, you feel it, or that anger comes around you, you feel it like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Why are you mad at me? But then at the end of the day, it's really just a reflection of themselves and their own personal journey.
Yeah.
What else you want to talk about on this topic?
I think that number one, abuse itself is a cycle, and so when it comes to learning how to love, like we talked about, unfortunately, if you look at people's history, somebody who is in an abusive relationship, chances are they did see something like that growing up. They witnessed that a lot of the time, and so. Obviously, like you talked about in the movie, breaking the cycle, but it's one of those things to where, unfortunately, you adopt this idea of this is what love is. So there's some people who grew up in relationships where their parents did yell at each other and cuss each other out. And then that's how you treat your significant other, because to you, that's normal. That's a normal relationship. Just like with me, like I said, that's not normal for me, because the normal thing is whatever the problem is, you handle it in private. So when you do get into a relationship, it's very important to ask somebody how they were raised.
Very important to understand that. Yeah.
Very important to understand.
Because the person that is let's say it's like a verbal abuser, or somebody who is like a master at manipulating, or what's another word girls like to use to describe guys?
Narcissist. Yeah,
they were perfect. That's exactly what I was saying. They might not even know.
Yeah.
They might not even know because they don't have that self-awareness yet. Like when I was a narcissist, I used to get called it a lot. I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, okay, now you start to do the inner work. You start to realize that you're like, okay, maybe I was. Like sometimes they don't know they're acting that way.
Yeah.
You just have to leave them where they are and let them and tell them and let them do the inner work. So sometimes they don't even know.
Yeah.
Just like you fall into those habits, those relationships of exactly how you grew up, like you're doing it subconsciously. So are they. It's all a work in progress at the end of the day.
Yeah. And obviously it's important to note that whatever you're working through, somebody else is working through something just as well. So it's like, for me, something that I've been accused of is allegedly I'm not affectionate in relationships. And I understand that obviously to be with a woman, you have to be affectionate, right? So that's something that I'm working on. So I understand I have to work on that. So what that means is that whatever she's working on as she gets to, you should have grace for that as well. Now, I'm not saying you should have grace for abuse. I'm not saying that. But for the normal things that people have to figure out.
The abuse part is just in the movie.
Yeah.
If that happens, there's no...
get out.
Get out.
They
got to do a lot more work on themselves.
But for the other things that people are working on, like my pet peeve, like in my current relationship is she's very bad at being punctual. But obviously,
it's pet peeve sometimes. Even though I'm always late.
You are always late. I'm always on time, so I feel like it does aggravate me. But I understand that obviously meeting the people and where she comes. Like I come from a place where people are very punctual. My grandfather said something once, and it's funny because this was the first time I heard it, was us going to our grandmother's funeral, and we were going, and we were basically getting to every stop early. And what he said was, hey, sometimes you have to rush to wait. And I was like, oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just got to rush to wait.
You have to rush to wait.
Yeah.
But I like to show up late.
Yeah, but you still show. So my thing with her is that when she comes from a family of, like, if they say the party's going to start at 4, the party's going to start at 5:45.
Exactly.
Saying everybody might get there at 4:30, trickling at 4:45. Then they still got to get everything set up because they didn't finish.
Show that how you grew up.
Exactly.
How you show up.
When I come from a place like when we went back to Maryland for Christmas, I'm like, dinner's at 2. we're going to be eating by 2:05. I just want you to know that. So we're going to have held hands and said grace by then.
Yeah.
But I was
When my mom says dinner's at 2, it's at 3:30.
Exactly. Right. So it's a different thing. So whatever you're working through, there's an equal and opposite thing that your partner is working through as well. So just like you want them to have grace and patience with you, just have a little bit with them as well.
100%. What would you say? How do you think that, you know, a person views love, or how do they show up in a relationship if they grew up in a single parent household?
I think it strictly depends on how they. Well, when you say single parent, are the parents still interacting with each other?
No.
Or just completely just
one parent.
Gotcha.
They don't know the other parent.
So I think it, number one, will depend on their relationship with that single parent, or and also what they see as their parent may or may not be dating, basically. But a lot of things, let's say it's a single mother, you didn't really see your mom date. Basically, your only view of a relationship is your interaction with her. That's your only relationship. So how she treats you, which creates a lot of mama's boys. And like when I went to
a lot of codependency,
a lot of extreme. Like when I went to college, I realized there's a bunch of grown men that don't even know how to wash or fold clothes, don't know how to iron, don't know how to do anything like that, because they had a mother at home who took care of every single one of those things for them. Every problem that they had, they run to mom.
You got to make your own doctor's appointments.
Yeah, exactly. all of those things. So what happens is that they bring that into their relationship and expect that their girl to now do all those things. And I'm like, and it's a very unfortunate thing for the woman, because you know that's why we can't get that saying, oh, you can't raise a man, because unfortunately a lot of young men who were coddled by that single mother while they were growing up never learned life skills, because they didn't learn how relationships are two people working together to get to a common goal. Instead, it was your mother obviously doing her best to make the best out of a bad situation and trying to give you everything that she possibly could. But in turn, you turn that into, now my partner should be doing all these things.
Right. And then you get into that relationship of, like the parenting relationship where your significant other is now acting as like your mother.
Yeah.
And those relationships are never going to work out because you're too codependent on it.
Correct.
And then she eventually feels
she's not going to respect you as a husband.
She feels so sick of keep telling you what to do.
Yeah.
That she starts to build the resentment against you. And then it's just a never ending process. So yeah, I definitely agree with that, because that's like a little bit of how I grew up. I did see my mom with, when I was younger, a couple other guys growing up. And then, she finally got with my stepdad. But the guy before her, is somebody that I really enjoyed when I was a kid. Like I saw him as like a dad.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then she leaves him, and now she's with, and then for the guy she's married to now, it was my stepdad. So beginning on, I like rejected that thought. And, I was a little bad kid growing up.
Yeah.
But then when I got into relationships, it was a lot of codependency and a lot of the, the same thing of the parenting. And it's like, at the end of the day, the girl's going to get tired of telling you what to do. You know what I'm saying? You got to be able to get up and go do it yourself.
Right.
So it's very important to be self-aware of how you grew up and how you were raised. And because I didn't meet my dad until like later on in life, when I was 20 years old, my biological father, I had this idea of like, I want a family. I want to do everything my mom didn't.
Right.
I want to do it right. You know what I'm saying? I want to have one girlfriend and marry that person, which is like when I told the first story of my first girlfriend.
Yeah.
And how that ended. I thought that was going to be the person I married and had kids with, and then lived happily ever after, just like the rom-coms. And then boom, that didn't happen. So I grew up seeing that, my mom being with my stepdad and then the guy before her, and saying like, oh, I didn't want to have that. I wanted to just have one person forever. That was it.
Right.
And then my older sister got married to her high school sweetheart. So I thought that's what I was going to do.
That's what everybody's got to do.
She got divorced.
Oh, God. Okay. Sorry.
It's not a happy ending.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It doesn't always happen. And then, the situation that happened in episode 4 that I explained with mine. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I kept seeking. I saw what I didn't want. I didn't want to be the co-parent and, have a step, anything in mind. I wanted to have, me, I get married to this chick. We have a family and kids and figure out life together. Obviously, that didn't happen. But I kept seeking that, seeking that. And it just kept creating cycles of like the codependency. And then it just, things don't work out, you just have to have that self-reflection and figure out what you could do better in the next thing. So it's a lifelong journey. The self-healing and the self-reflection is a lifelong journey, because everything that you went through in your early relationships, in your childhood, what you've seen from your parents, what you even seen in movies, it's going to affect how you show up in your current relationship. And if you don't believe that, you're wrong.
I also think that you have to remember that when you do see these happy relationships around you, you're seeing the end result of a lot of work that was done in the trenches. There's a lot of private work that gets done during these things. And growing up, obviously, I come from a family where pretty much everybody's married for the most part. But when you grow up and the adults start to tell a little bit more of the business, you hear about all the things that were kind of going on around the time where people were getting together, and so the stories are a little bit messy. I ain't gonna tell my family business on here, but the stories are a little bit messy. So knowing that, okay, all right, so I'm not doing too bad. You know what I'm saying? Because when you see everything on the end, everything looks like it's a storybook ending. And so in your head, all you know is that they were together and that they're happy. And in your head, that's the only thing that happened. But there was a lot of things going on in the beginning, middle, and at this current point that happened that were very tough for them, that you may not have any idea. And unfortunately, you're going to have to go through those things too. Somebody else is going to look at you in your happy relationship one day and say, wow, I want it like that. And you're like, well, no, you don't, because this is what we had to go through during this time as well to actually get here.
100%. And I'll tell you, if you're going to take any type of relationship advice, because at the end of the day, everyone's still trying to figure it out,
right?
Don't take advice from somebody in a relationship that they're unhappy in, somebody who isn't fully committed to their partner. So
don't take advice from your single friends either, because some of them are stupid.
They're single for a reason. You know what I'm saying? I'm single I'm not going to tell you how to be in a marriage, because I can't talk on that. I can tell you how to fix relationships and maybe the inner reflection you need to do on yourself, because I've done a lot of that. I can only speak on what I've done a lot of. I can't tell you how to run a successful marriage, because I haven't been in one yet. But trust me, I will be in one. It's just going to take, it's a lifelong journey of doing inner work. So other than that, what's your final thoughts?
I will say, number one, understand what your ideas and ideologies are about what love is. And understand what your partners are as well. Understand where you come from and how those things have affected you, and understand how the same things on the other side have affected them. Because one of my philosophies is that you're never gonna 100% the key to understanding your partner is to understand that you're never gonna fully understand them.
Correct.
So makes you psychologically you want to do the work to just understand just a little bit more every single day, and that's going to change how you communicate, how you interact, and hopes that it ends up at a good place in the end. Obviously, unfortunately, sometimes you're going to understand a little bit more, and the more that you understand is going to let you know maybe I actually don't want to be here, and that's okay too, because all of that's part of the process, and you'd rather figure that out sooner than later.
Listen to understand instead of being understood. So how we grow up is completely different. You know what I'm saying? Like your childhood is completely different than how my childhood was. And when you're in that relationship with your partner, how they grew up is so different than you. So you have to sit back and kind of understand that, like, how they react is based on accumulation of all those years, childhood things that happened in their life, how they were raised, their early relationships, all that stuff. You have to understand that. And you're never going to fully understand your partner, but you're going to consistently work at it. And that's the beautiful thing about love is that you're working every single day, you're choosing that person. Every day. So you're choosing to understand them more. You're choosing to understand how they show up, and you're growing with that person together. And I would recommend the book that I did just read by Vanessa Bennett and John Kim, It's Not Me, It's You. It's a great relationship book to kind of understand your own attachment styles, how you show up. It does talk about the 5 love languages a little bit, but overall it is a great great book and has a lot of great information in it. So definitely recommend you guys checking that one out.
Yep.
But other than that, that is all I have for you guys today.
Yeah, and lastly, guys, again, if you find any value, comfort, or entertainment in anything that you do, like, comment, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and we will see you
next week.
Next time.